Three, two, one. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Creators Lounge Group Chat, episode 9. This is going to be quite an intriguing episode. We're touching on a topic I haven't covered very much in my digital content or in the podcast or anything of that nature. So I'm really interested to dig into this and hear these two amazing individuals' thoughts on the subject. We're covering religion. Recently, I've been trying to diversify my content and get into some different topics that I haven't covered before, and religion is one of them. So I'm really excited to sit down with these two geniuses and hear their thoughts on the subject and things of this nature. So let's begin with some introductions. Let's go with Sumaya first. Sumaya, what is your name? Where are you from? And what do you do? Sumaya.
My name is Sumaya. I'm from Dubai, United Arab Emirates. And my major in college was medical laboratory technology. And I work in blood donation center. But I'm more interested in self-development. And I consider myself as a student of life. Dreamer, adventurer, traveler. So
amazing. I've had the honor of meeting Sumaya earlier this year, and we've gone back and forth on a lot of cool subjects. And Jacob, what is your name? Where are you from? What do you do?
All right. My name is Jake, or Jacob Ramirez. I am from the U.S. Basically, a lot of different places, Texas and Virginia and North Carolina. And then for work, I am a teacher, and I also work at church. I'm a director of music, interim music director right now for a new church. And I do a lot with different theater groups and things like that.
All right, incredible. These two individuals are highly accomplished and they have a big brain. So to get right into the conversation on religion, let's go with Sumaya first of all. Sumaya, if you don't mind me asking, what is your religion? What are some of the fundamental beliefs of your religion? For anyone who has never heard about your religion, kind of give us the breakdown of what it is exactly.
So actually we have the faith and we have the practice. So the faith that we believe in God and we believe in all the prophets, that he has messengers, including Moses and Joseph and Jacob and Jesus. And we believe in all the holy books, the Bible, Torah and Quran. We believe in angels and we believe in judging day. And we believe also in fate. I'm remembering. And the practice, we have 5 practices. The first one, that we believe that God is one and Prophet Muhammad is his messenger. And then we have the prayer, like 5 times a day. And it's like just short prayers during the day. And then we have something called zakat, which is giving money to the poor annually from your, like, for example, if you have $1,000 in your bank account, you have to give 2.5% of it to the poor. So this is like every year. This is different than giving like charity. Like this is something like basic practice of Islam. And then we have fasting in Ramadan, which is like 1 month every year. It's the 9th month of the Islamic calendar. And then we have Hajj. It's the pilgrimage. It's in a certain time of the year. And you do that only once in your lifetime, if you can afford it, to go to Mecca and do like the pilgrimage. But of course, people can visit like during the year, but it's the actual pilgrimage has to happen in a certain month. So these are the beliefs in Islam.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you, Sumaya. Great breakdown. And then Jake, jumping over to you, what is your primary religion? And then if you could break down some of the key beliefs of that religion as well.
All righty. So I'm a Christian. I prefer to describe it as a follower of Christ, even though I know Christian was originally like the derogatory term, early on in Christian history, and they kind of reappropriated it. So the fundamental beliefs, firstly in the divinity of Christ, and I guess I've got to give a disclaimer. Christianity is a very, very broad spectrum of separate, I would say, even religions. I prefer to call them structured spiritualities. but there are a lot of them that have a lot of different beliefs. And there are some structured spiritualities that identify as Christianity that, like, the mainstream fundamentalists or the evangelicals would not recognize as Christianity. But for me, I am, as of right now, I'm at a Presbyterian church, which would be Calvinist, and has a belief in original sin, which is essentially that when in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve made the choice to separate themselves from God by sinning for the first time, that is something that we all must atone for, that we are all responsible for and accountable for. And then following that all the way through to Christ himself, that Christ, being born as a man who was also God, offered himself as a sacrifice to kind of atone for those sins, and that was his mission, and in the midst of that there were teachings on love and unity and things like this. That ultimately that was the goal, was to reconcile this disconnection with God and humanity, and that Christ was that reconciliation. He was the embodiment of it, but he also brought that reconciliation in offering himself, to be killed, and then was resurrected, right, 3 days later, as he talked about, and then ascended to heaven. And it is fascinating because there are many different branches of Christianity that have differences of opinion on, like, original sin, right? Or the Trinity, which is God the Father, God the Son, and then God the Holy Spirit, right? The Holy Trinity. The Church of Latter-day Saints, which is not commonly recognized as Christianity by a lot of evangelicals, actually holds a view that Christ, before he ascended to heaven, went to appear to more than just the disciples and the people that it states in the Gospels. And that is something that they continue to look for evidence for in places even like South America, which is pretty interesting. And as a Christian, I believe what the Bible says, but I also hold an open mind to have discussions about, those kind of beliefs. So yeah, it's awesome. Pretty fascinating.
Something we got into before the recording even started was the effect of religion and culture on countries. And so, even if we look around the world right now, we can still see how much of a hold various religions have on that area or that country or that state or that city. So to transition with that, I want to hear for you both. Sumaya, let's have you go first. Why did you come to accept Islam? Where did that stem from? Do you feel like it was more influence, personal choice, a little bit of both? How did you come to accept Islam as your primary faith?
So actually, I was born a Muslim, so I didn't really choose that. And then, of course, my family, they are religious, and they taught us, through the years, many stories. But what I'm grateful for, that they never emphasized the differences. We never learned to hate other religions or other beliefs, or because actually this is the structure of Islam. People don't know that Islam actually means peace. The word Islam means coming from the word salam in Arabic, which means peace. And the first rule in Islam, actually, when the Prophet began preaching that people are equal, everybody is equal, like slaves, there's no slavery except to God. So, and this is one of the major challenges he had, not because people did not believe him. He lived 40 years of his life with his people before he started preaching. So everybody knew him before that, and everybody like trusted him and everything. But once he started coming with the idea that everybody is equal, they were not happy anymore. So they started fighting him, and they didn't like it. And there was some time where I felt that I needed to like learn from the start. Like, okay, if I wasn't a Muslim, and then would I still choose to become a Muslim? Then I started learning, and I started learning also about different religions and stuff. And I started reading mostly about Buddhism. And what I liked about Buddhism, that it's a very like peaceful kind of religion. Like it's like a focus on the self, on the development of the self and the mind. But it doesn't like focus on like who's right and who's wrong, right? Because like this, like who's right and who's wrong, like, or debating and stuff, it just like, I think it makes like isolation between human beings, except like that we have to respect other people beliefs and like thinking in life. So I think also like one of the things that like maybe people with power use to control other people is religion. Like this is why many of the wars happen in the world, because of religion. It's because of the power, like power fight, but they just use it in the name of religion, while they don't care even about the religion itself.
Oh, absolutely, Sumaya.
And actually reading about Buddhism made me like reflect about Islam more. And for me, like Islam is more about the faith, which is like believing in something bigger than myself, because I feel it's a very lonely and scary world if there is nothing bigger than us. Like we don't believe, we just like, I will think I will feel very, very lonely, very scared if I don't believe in a bigger power of the universe or God. So
wow. Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. Jake, I'd love to contrast with your experience, obviously with Sumaya. She said, she was born a Muslim. How about for you then, Jake? What was your relationship with Christianity in terms of how did you come to accept Christianity? Were you also born into it, or do you feel like it was something that you kind of like stepped into as you grew up over the years?
I was born into Christianity. I had, I had my come to Christ moment when I was like 3, right? But I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't have like a personal understanding of it. It was just kind of what I was doing. And I think I had a rudimentary understanding of it, but it eventually became clouded, by culture, honestly. Like so many things that I guess I would say it like you see somebody wearing a military uniform and you assume that they are in the military, but you actually don't know, right? If they're following the rules, if they're waking up, and it's supposed to, all these different things. Right. So I'd say that's, I would liken that to, kind of the way that Christianity can be used by certain people who just want to be a certain way or have a certain opinion and express it to a certain group of people. But I was born into it. I grew up as a Christian. And then when I got into high school and college, honestly, I was confronted with a lot of different questions. And a lot of people were like, oh, well, why do you believe what you believe? And sometimes it was in an antagonistic way. They're like, oh, well, screw you for being Christian. And sometimes it was just a gentle questioning, right? And to kind of circle back for just a second to the, screw you for being a Christian thing. It was not because they hated Christians. It was because they hated what they thought Christians had to be in order to be Christians, right? Just kind of that dichotomy between what the Bible actually says and what Christ's teachings actually tell us, and what Christians themselves have become in the United States specifically. So it's fascinating. And we were talking about, like Thomas Jefferson, and all of this. And this is it's got a long history here, of racism and terrible, terrible things and horrible actions and, things like sexual violence. right? Even in the context of Thomas Jefferson. And so that is something that I think reflects my own perspective on it now, in that, much like Sumaya said, it's a personal practice. So many people I see take on Christianity because they think that it helps them control other people. You know, they'll be like, oh, well, but this is, you know, how we're supposed to behave, right? And they'll mask it with the statement of, oh, I'm just trying to love these people, right? Then stop trying to control them. You know? then let them live their lives and love them from afar, you know.
But Jake, I can't love them if they're acting how I don't agree with.
Well, exactly. Right?
Sarcasm, obviously.
Yeah, well, I don't even know who it was, but I was talking to a professor at one point, and they said to me, one of the signs of a healthy mind is the ability to let other people believe things that are different than what you do and be okay with it. You don't have to control everyone's beliefs. Like, would you want to really even control your own? Because to a certain extent, we're not in control of them, right? But anyway, so yeah, that's kind of how.
To jump in on that, Jake, I was going to say a quote that came to mind. Jay Shetty, who Sumaya, I know you're familiar with, and Jake might have heard him in passing. He has a cool quote about that same thing. He says that, I'm kind of paraphrasing here. He said the highest form of love is to accept people for where they are and not where they could be. You're coming to accept them for where they are right now, you know, and not some fake version of who they could be eventually. Sumaya, I'd love to jump over to you. Like Jake was hinting at, there's a lot of discord, even like within the Christian religion, about you're a fake Christian, you're a real Christian, you're this Christian, you're that Christian. A lot of fighting even inside that religion. Is it the same way for Islam, do you feel?
Of course. ISIS, they were killing Muslims. They were even killing Muslims because they are calling them bad Muslims. We're the same religion, and they're still like doing all these horrible things. And there's one quote also, I wrote it for you, Ben. But I don't know who said it, but it says, if becoming religious has made you more judgmental, rude, harsh, backbiter, you need to check if you are worshiping God or your ego. Yeah. So
I'm gonna clap for that.
This is the thing, like really seriously, it's like being religious has to make a person more at peace, more acceptance, more of all these like beautiful values. If not, then what's the point of religion? It's not there to like fight other people and like to go. And you know, like there's one, I don't know if you know him. He's called Christopher Pike. He writes like teenager novels or something.
Okay.
Do you know him?
The name sounds familiar, but I don't know him specifically.
And actually, I read that in a book about vampire, but it stuck with me. And I started looking for it for this episode, but I couldn't find. But I remember the story that somebody was asking, like, what is the biggest sin? And you know, like, this is a question I started asking people, you know, like, what do you think is the biggest sin? And people will go like not believing in God or like killing or whatever, you know. But the biggest sin actually is pride and ego, because this is the reason the devil, like, he was an angel, right? And he refused to bow for Adam just because of his ego. And then he started doing all of these things after, you know, like he like swore like to like make, or like Adam and Eve children mislead their way or whatever. But the origin was the ego, because he thought he was better than Adam, and I'm the best worshiper of you, God. How dare you create somebody who's less than me, and you ask me to bow for him? So
it's intriguing, Sumaya, and it goes back to, like you said before, about unity, you know, and how people couldn't accept the message of unity, you know. And so I think what I want to ask you guys next, and it gets a bit cloudy here, you know, separating this into what the religion is actually focused on versus how people interpret it and use it. Like you guys mentioned already, using it as a tool for fear, using it as a tool for control. Are there any core tenets of your respective religions that you guys don't agree with, or that you've come to question in recent years? Even if you don't fully disagree, maybe you've been really questioning it over the last few years. Jake, let's go with you first on this one.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting one. One of them, I guess, is a bit of a tricky question, because it is not that I would say I disagree with the Nicene Creed at all. I do have some reservations about the establishing of the canon in the Bible itself, and just kind of how some verses reference books that are no longer included, So the Apocrypha and Pseudepigrapha have always been really fascinating to me, and I think it gets a little muddy when we start to like read everything that was originally included and that we originally built our, I don't want to call it a mythology, but our belief system on, our structured spirituality on, and then to see which of those things were removed at, like the councils of Nicaea. It's fascinating to see how the book itself has evolved, and how even different translations. So, and I mean, not to get too rowdy with it, but there are places in the Bible where I think it was the King James Version first changed references to genitalia to the word feet. So, yeah. So when you're reading
and
it,
why?
there are some places where you're like, oh, so like the whole Ruth and Boaz thing, and it says she uncovered his feet, and you're like, oh, well, what's going on here? Yeah, so that might have been less Disney Plus series and more like HBO Max original series,
Wow.
Yeah, so we have changed things, and then there was another modification, and this one is a little bit muddy, and I've been trying to kind of get to the root of it, and I've just been working a lot, so I don't have a lot of really good resources on it yet, but the use of the word homosexual in the Bible versus a word like pervert or deviant or pedophile, right? That is a huge distinction to make. And from what I've been reading lately, and I'm still trying to get to the root, right? Like where this first started and which translation. Firstly, the two different words that I think was the Apostle Paul was using when he described what now in these translations says homosexual, or sexually immoral person or whatever, was referring to a sort of culturally like sustained pedophilia among, I think it was the Greeks, but I'm not completely sure. And that being bled into this contemporary Christian perception of, well, we can't have gay people getting ordained, and we can't, it's really astounding, because one of the ways that it was explained was when the Catholic Church started getting scrutinized for all of the sexual abuse that was occurring there, they were like, oh, well, that word means homosexual. You can't be gay. There's nothing wrong with being a pedophile, but you can't be gay, and that's not necessarily the way that it happened, but it's a good reduction. I'd say that gets the point across, though it may not be completely factual. That is essentially kind of, I think, the way that we've been talking about it this entire time, where it's a way that we can, if we are choosing to try and be a better person and do this and use it in the proper context where it's focusing on yourself, and a mirror rather than a window, that draws fake mustaches on people and tells them all to shave,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and Jake, I mean, that's why I think critical thinking is so important. And basically, to summarize, for anyone who missed it just now, basically Jake was talking about how do we choose which books stay in the Bible, which ones are not included in the Bible, and then also how do we do certain translations, because throughout the years, translations have changed in the Bible about what they're referring to and how we translate them, especially because we're dealing with languages that are very, very old, and so there's not always a direct translation for the words they use in the Bible, and people just make guesses throughout the ages of like what it was probably referring to or might have referred to. But then, of course, like you're saying, corruption and agendas can seep into there as well, depending on how we want to give a perception of what it's saying and how we want to use that in the best way, which goes back to the whole fear and control tactics as well. But this is why critical thinking is so important, Jake, because if it wasn't for people like you who actually do the research on that stuff, then we would just believe, oh, the Bible says this, this, and this. But then after you do the actual research, it's like, does it really? What's the original text? How is it translated? Was that influenced by someone's own personal bias, and the political nature at the time? So it's really important to do research on these things because you can't take it at face value. Stuff has changed, especially when it comes to religion, because of context, which is a huge word, and also because of influence at the time, political influence and also control influence. Sumaya, jumping the question over to you then, is there any core tenets of your religion that you don't agree with?
Actually, for me, maybe like heaven and hell, because like we say that only Muslims will go to heaven and non-Muslims, all of them, they will go to hell. And then I looked, I think Christian says the same thing, only Christian will go to heaven and other non-Christian will go to hell. I'm like, is there a different heaven for everybody? And the thing is like, I was already born a Muslim, right? And we believe that God is just like, he's fair, right? It's like, and this is not fair. I didn't do anything. I was born a Muslim, right? And then what if somebody never heard about Islam in their life? Or like the world is so big, like maybe there are some people who never ever heard about Islam, so they will go to hell because they're not Muslims. So this idea actually, but what I think, it's not the religion, I think is what people, as you said, like it's written in a certain way, the way they interrupt it is this. But for me, I believe that God is fair and God is merciful. And it's not my place to judge other people beliefs, or, like for me, a good person is a good person. Like a person who's good, it means a good human being. It doesn't matter to me what religion they are following. And there is one story I read. It's a true story, by the way, and you can find it in the internet. It's about a Hindu man who found a boy. He was 3 years old, and he asked him, what is your name? And the boy said Akbar, and Akbar in India is a Muslim name. So imagine this Hindu man raised this boy as a Muslim, although he's Hindu. He raised him, like he took him to the mosque and they taught him Quran there, and he helped him to become like a good Muslim, like following his religion and everything. He respected that. And then imagine, like somebody wrote their story in the newspaper. Suddenly the parents appear, and the parents never reported the missing child, by the way, because this guy went to the police first. He wasn't reported, and suddenly they want their child back. And the child, he refused. He said, he's the only parents I know, this Hindu man. I know I don't want to go back to my parents. And actually the court let that boy stay with this guy. So I believe humanity, humanity and kindness. And also the Dalai Lama said, kindness is my religion. So this is something I believe in, like the values. We have to look at the values. Mm-hmm. Like the equality, the kindness, compassion, all of these things. Because if we believe in that, then we don't have any problems between us and other religions.
Oh, I love
but once we start having problems, it means there's something wrong.
I love that, and it's something I believe similarly. I've been highly influenced by the Buddhist monk, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh over the years, and dude's an OG. I love him to death. But the way he talks about this was really altering for me. And he talks about heaven and hell being available right now is what he often talks about. He's like, if you're suffering, if you're unhappy, you're not waiting for hell. You're living in hell right this minute. But if you're happy, if you're loving, if you're alive, then you're already in heaven. You don't have to wait for heaven to arrive. You're already living in that. And that was just so mind-altering for me, because I think that so many people live with the illusion of like, I'm working to get to this place, or I'm destined to end up at this place. And it's like, you don't have to be destined to be there. You're there already right now, you know? Like, if you're not unhappy, that's already hell on earth. You know, if you're happy, that's heaven on earth. And so, not discounting the fact that there may or may not be those later on, but also at the same time, don't neglect where you are right now in this moment. Jake, I'm not sure if you wanted to add something to what Sumaya said. Did you want to jump back on that, or should we move to the next question?
No, I mean, I would say I absolutely agree. That's one of the things that it kind of boiled down to, because the entire time I was at school, I had this kind of it was like this crisis of identity, this crisis of faith and all of this. And it wasn't that what I believed was changing. It was that what I thought I had to believe was falling away. It really got back to that point where it was kindness, you know, and it was like, hey, maybe just exist and exist as a kind person, just be and be nice.
Well, and Jake, and it's so easy for us to do this, and I think that I've gone through it a bit in my life, and maybe even a bit right now. I was even talking with my brother Ethan recently about this, about how so many trains of thought, not just religion, but just in general, we always have this vision of who we should be or who we could be, and often that illusion is just an illusion. It's not a reality. So we tell ourselves we should be the multimillionaire, we should be the famous CEO, we should be the idol on stage, and then there comes that breaking point when you start to realize, oh, I'm not going to be that person. But it's not a bad thing. It's only because we've set up that expectation of that's who we need to be, that's who we should be. And so what happens, I think, is that the habits or the routine replace the reality of what's happening. And so you trade reality of like who I am and how I feel, and you replace that with who I should be or who I could be or who I'm becoming, which can be a harmful thing. I'm not saying change is obviously great and it's great to develop and improve, but whenever you replace the reality for this, you know, fictional story you're building or telling yourself, it can become quite dangerous. And it's something I've had to challenge myself on a lot in recent years, because I'm so deep into the self-development realm of like not letting my pursuit of self-development, or not letting my morning routine replace who I am as a person, my personality, my individualism, the fact that I do have bad days, and that's okay, you know. And so I think it's very easy to let these patterns and routines and systems replace the reality of what's happening in exchange for what should be happening or what could be happening, you know. I'd love to ask you a little bit more, because you kind of mentioned it, Jake, right there, about having that kind of identity crisis. Sumaya, how has your relationship with your religion changed throughout the years, you know, being born into Islam and then also doing some of your own self-exploration? How has your relationship with Islam changed over the decades and years?
So actually, like, I was in the guilt trap before. So like, you know, like they will use guilt, like if you do that you will go to hell, if you lie you will go to hell, if you do this, you know, you are a bad person. So maybe I was doing what I was doing out of guilt, because I'm scared, or I didn't want to become a bad person. Even now, actually, I don't even know if I'm a good Muslim or not, according to people. But I'm just working on becoming a good human being. Like, so this is like the ultimate goal, I think, like living by the values. So, and you know that I'm saying that there is a movie called Soul. Anyway,
inside comment there. Okay. But yeah, just for reference, for anyone watching, Sumaya has been hounding me to watch this film for the past like 2 months now, and I continue to say no, I won't watch it.
Right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
I love it.
Did you watch it, Jake?
Oh yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. So they talk about the concept of lost souls, that you lose your souls when you are obsessed about something, even if it was your passion, even that will make you a lost soul. So like that's like by the values, like moment to moment in life. I think this is the ultimate life goal.
I love that, Sumaya. Real quick, want to ask a reference point. Was it a certain experience that helped you break free of that guilt, or do you think it was just very much more of a gradual change that happened over the years?
I think I went into like guilt until I hated myself, and I stopped loving myself. Really, literally, I like hated myself, and I wished like that I die or vanish from this world. Did it even, like, it was so horrible actually. Like I didn't even wish to die. I wished to vanish because I didn't even want people to feel bad that I died,
Yeah.
Just like I never been born, like didn't exist. So I felt like the world will become a better place if I didn't even exist. Like that was the amount of guilt I felt and shame and everything. I think just like hitting that rock bottom, like, and then as I told you, just surrounding to a bigger power than myself, to the universe, to God, like I believe God is the universe, God is us and is the universe. We have a verse in Quran saying that that God is telling us that I'm closer to you than the vein in your neck. So what does it mean? If he's closer to us than the vein in our neck, it means it's in all of us, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think me and Jake relate with that a lot.
I know. I'm like, oh man, yeah, because I've got a big vein. I love that. Oh my goodness.
Jake, jump in, please. Like, how has your relationship with your religion changed over the years?
Okay.
And you can drop your thoughts on what Sumaya said as well, because it clearly touched you. So I mean, feel free to elaborate.
Yeah. Honestly, just really talking to other people and hearing their experiences, just like listening and kind of learning from what other people have experienced, and then really just rereading for myself the Gospel of Mark. I had a really formative experience with a class in college, and I had been this kind of fundamentalist Christian before. I went to school, I had all these questions, and I started taking a bunch of theology classes because I was hiding from all the vocal majors in the music department, because I was like, everyone's so petty. Oh no, I'll stay in the social sciences building and the humanities. So I just ended up taking all these theology classes, and I ended up taking one that was called biblical storytelling with probably the professor that has helped me the most in my whole academic career, because he helped reframe my idea of God. And I guess to preface this, we had spent some time in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which, and this is not to diss on anyone of any particular faith, but it was pretty traumatizing for me, just because there was a lot of stuff that I couldn't reconcile. And like Sumaya, you were just saying, there's this guilt and shame and everything. And I remember at one point there was this one like perfect just crossroads of everything when I was like 12. We were about to move to Virginia, and I was all anxious, and we were doing this like learn how to type program that was absolutely traumatizing because I was so bad at it, and I was also having to learn the piano at the same time. So I was like, I suck at life. But this thing happened where we watched this video that was like the final events of Bible prophecy from the perspective of this church. And it was like, Jesus is coming back and he's going to wreck your shit. It was not like you know what I mean? It was this loving mentality. It was like, no, he's going to blow everything up. Like basically it was like, it felt like they were saying Thanos is coming instead of Jesus is coming. So it was really, really crazy. But that just like shook me to my core, and it got me to this point where I was so anxious, and I didn't even realize this until literally like 2 days ago, that when I would do the typing program, I was so freaked out that if I messed up the typing program, that like when Jesus came back, he was not going to take me with him. He was just going to blow me up with everybody else or whatever. And then when I got to college, we would read all these different books, and it was like, no, that is not the God that, you know, he talks about in the Bible. That's not even the Jesus that is in the Bible. And I was challenged by this professor to encounter the Gospel of Mark as a story. And I did. He'd sent us this translation, and I printed it off and put it in a binder. And like I did for all my classes, I went through the text with a notebook a pen. And I wrote in the margins, and I read it as a story. I started at the beginning, and it was like maybe 10 at night when I started, and it was about 4 a.m. when I finished. And I was going through it, and I loved it because firstly, the Gospel of Mark is like the comic book gospel, right? It starts off with a bang. It's just like, you know, you got John, and he's like, oh yeah, Jesus is coming. And then Jesus comes in, he's like, miracles, and you get healed and all this stuff. And it's really cool. And then you get farther along, and he starts talking, and you're like, wow, this guy really got it, you know? And he talks about, you know, the kind of cosmology and, you know, his Father in heaven. And you're like, wow, this is really intense. This is a crazy concept. And at that point, I was struggling to just read it as a story, you know, even though that's how it started out. I was like, wow, this is intense. And then when he starts talking about like, well, I'm going to die. And you're like, nah, Jesus, come on. Like, you know, like you were just doing all those miracles. Get out of here. And then when that actually happens, you know, it's so intense, especially because, you know, the buildup and what he says to the crowd that comes to get him, where he's like, I was literally teaching in your churches. I was standing there in the middle of the day, and you didn't come and take me away. Why is that? You know, you're gonna come at me like a terrorist, right? With all the clubs and swords and everything. And it just started to like break me. There was something in my heart that was just like, oh man, this is such an intense story. And it's not even necessarily, because for me, it is a personal belief, but that's the challenge that I kind of give to anyone, is that this is the example. And the way we describe it, I took a contemporary theologies class, right? And there are different Christologies, different ways of viewing Christ. And so one of the simplest ones is moral exemplar, which is basically Christ is the example of how we should behave as a moral agent in the world. And even on that level, it's just earth-shattering. And you take that the entire way through to the end, where he's on the cross, and he says, you know, why did you abandon me to God? And you realize that at that point, he felt completely disconnected from God, which is the concept of sin, right? That we are disconnected from God. And it's just absolutely astounding. And then at the end, you know, where it's like a cliffhanger where they're like, oh yeah, he's gone, and they run back, and then, you know, it's just a very intense thing. So reading that was just very intense for me. But there were a couple other experiences I had that, you know, I won't go into, but that kind of shaped that. But it was really just trying to understand, I guess, what it was all about. And just reading it as a story, which was the weirdest thing, made it more real to me than it ever had been before. And it was also after a time of unpacking, like I said, all the things I thought I had to believe, to recognize that no, like the simplicity of Christ is loving, you know, and just being nice and extending that love to other people. Especially because I've talked to friends of other faiths, and Christianity to them means judging people, you know, or it means, especially in the United States, it means, you know, being racist or being committed to not knowing the truth, you know, or whatever it is. And those things are very, very sad, and they don't reflect Christ. They reflect the American ego.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So,
well, Jake, I love what you said just now about that. For anyone who's unfamiliar with it, basically the Christian Bible, they tell the same story in 3 different books. I think it's 3, if I'm not mistaken: Matthew, Mark, Luke and
Luke, and then John.
Okay, so it's 4 then. So it's basically the same story told across 4 different books with different perspectives on the story itself. And Jake, I love what you said though about reading Mark specifically and how it came to you as a story. Because what it brought to mind for me is the old classic adage of tell me and I'll forget, show me and I will remember, let me do it and I'm going to understand it. Because I think that's also what happens with so many different beliefs in life, whether it be veganism or religion or other trains of thought as well. I'm just going to throw out there because I think it happens with everything is that, even if we hear it, like we might believe it or say that's true, but it doesn't mean anything to us. We're not emotionally connected to that way of life until something happens, right? And so in the same way for you of like reading this story, no longer was it just something disconnected, like separate from you. You could see yourself in that story. You could feel emotionally attached to that story when it was happening. And I had the same thing. I've seen the same thing happen with other people as well. I did a podcast with my dear friend Farah, and she was talking about veganism, how she was kind of leading a vegetarian leaning lifestyle, but it wasn't until there were certain things that happened that made her really say, okay, I've got to become a full-on vegan because this makes too much sense to me now. It really affected me emotionally. And I think for people, that's the thing, is that we often see ourselves as separate from these trains of thoughts, whether it be related to religion or the environment or things of this nature. A lot of us are seeing it from the outside looking in. And then once you actually get into that emotional connection with it, then you can say like, this works for me, or I see myself here, or I understand this much more from the inside, right? And I think it goes back to what you said as well, Sumaya, about guilt. I had no idea for so many years, like, that guilt's a problem. Like, I never really thought about guilt as an issue. We think about other stuff like hurting people, or being mean to people, but like we don't think about guilt as one of the big struggles. And I've realized that for myself, I deal with a lot of guilt. And I'm talking with more people, and they also said they're dealing with guilt. And I'm like, oh, damn, like we have like, a guilt pandemic, across people around the world that's got to be addressed as well, and figuring that out. You guys have already shared a lot about how your religion affects your daily life. So I want to ask you guys, how have you seen religion affect the lives of the people around you? Whether it's a positive or negative way. Maybe if you guys could think of some examples to share on this one. Could it be someone you're close with or people you see? How do you feel like religion has affected the people around you? Sumaya, do you want to go first on this one?
I think also like it's like growing a community. Like for me, what I love Ramadan, because Ramadan is the only because like in Ramadan we fast the whole day and then we eat sunset time. So like during like the year, me and my family, we just eat at different times. Like sometimes I eat at work, sometimes, but during Ramadan we all eat at the same time. Actually I have like also non-Muslim friends. They would just like go, yo, yeah, let's go and eat, like in Ramadan, let's go eat all together, like, and break the fast. Some of them, they fast as well. It just like grow this like kind of connection, I think. Like, I think this is also like why religion is there. Like people feel like connected somehow. And like also the prayer times is the same time. Like when the people go to the mosque also is the same. Like so I think this is just the feeling of connection to other people. So this is what's important, I think.
I agree, Sumaya. I agree. I think that so much of life is habitual. It's habitual in nature. There's habits and routines we follow. And so when we find other people in that same kind of habit or lifestyle, we immediately have that in common with them. And then we can kind of grow from there. Jake, what's your take on this? How have you seen religion affect the people around you, whether it's positive or negative?
I think, let's see, the more people, or the more that any person that I've seen dives into a personal reflection and study of Christianity and not Christianity specifically, but the scripture, right? What is actually in the Gospels, what Christ himself says, I've seen that they become, in most cases, not everyone, more, Christ-like. They seem to reflect the principles that Christ himself was speaking of. And the reason I say that is because, like I said, that one professor really, really helped shape just my not my perspective in the sense that he was like chopping away at things that, like I was believing, but that I saw that he was having this personal exploration, and with the freedom to read, he was able to establish what the truth is and also very clearly define what the truth wasn't. As opposed to where I have a couple friends who are studying to be pastors, and they're doing this in the context of a specific denomination, and I see a lot of ego there. Because it's just a bunch of old men in business suits sitting around at a table trying to feel important and talking about, oh, well, what are the rules? It's like, is it about the rules, or is it about loving people? And that's not to say that we shouldn't have moral standards, but it's just strange to see that when that is paired with what we were talking about before, with the culture, and not more of an individual introspective pursuit of truth, that it becomes this posturing, if that makes sense, because they're afraid to say something that the older members of their affiliate would disagree with, because they're like, oh, well, I haven't reached that status yet, I can't make the rules. Well, you won't make the rules when you get there either.
Oh, exactly, Jake. No, and I think we see that happen in so many fields, which is, why it's become a stereotype about you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And it happens at every field, and even the best of us even fall into that trap. I saw recently about his name's gonna slip my mind. One of the greatest financial investors, one of the richest men alive.
Robert Kiyosaki?
No. This Charlie Munger, and then his buddy. I can't believe I forgot his name. Yeah, he's like one of them.
Warren Buffett?
Yeah, Warren Buffett. Thank you, Jake. I can't believe it slipped my mind. Even like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger there was a video clip where they were basically saying crypto was like a big scam and it wasn't going to go anywhere. But, if you ask the majority of people who are actually plugged into the cryptocurrency scene, like they're actually being like, no, that's quite, that's an underinformed statement to be making, And so, the longer that we live, the more that we get entrenched in certain ideals and opinions, and we don't challenge them, we don't keep them fresh, we don't re-examine them. And so it's very easy to let a false or wrong perception become cemented in how our actions and behavior. It's very important to keep our minds open, especially the older that we get. Looking at the future for your respective religions, what do you think the future looks like for individuals who follow your religious beliefs? What are some of the changes you think they're going to experience? How do you think the religion is going to be shaped as we continue forward? Sumaya, any thoughts on that subject?
Actually, we had, I think it was 2019, like we have, in my country, we have a theme every year. So I think it was 2019, we had the year of tolerance. So the goal of that year was like to emphasize on the acceptance of other religions, because actually we have 90% like foreigners in my country. And we are only 10%.
Jake, you want to give us some context on that in a second, but yes, Sumaya, keep going.
Sorry.
We are only 10%. This is the truth. Anyway, so they want to make that the goal, accepting other people's religion, instead of fighting over. But I think my people in my country already accept other people's religion anyway. And actually, I wanted to say that earlier, that also we have Jesus' story in Quran as well. Where maybe it's a bit different toward the end.
Right.
It's the same. Like even Virgin Mary also, but we call her Maryam.
Yep.
But it's the same story. Like she was a virgin and then she got pregnant. And then her child, Jesus spoke while he was still an infant, and then he was healing people and stuff. Yeah, so we have the story also in Quran.
Right. No, Sumaya, I think I agree with you as well on the tolerance thing. I think especially there in Dubai specifically, because it's made up of, like you said, so many foreigners and immigrants, right? And so I've heard stories of people who go there and like, oh yeah, the people there speak 4 languages, 5 languages, just because they're so surrounded by so many different cultures and, experiences that it just seeps into you. You become understanding because you're around it every single day of your life. Just a real quick follow-up, Sumaya, do you feel like the Year of Tolerance, do you feel like it kind of met the expectations they had for the project?
It did. There was some resistance, of course,
Mm.
of some people. Like they were like, "Whoa, what are they trying to do?" You know, and stuff. But yeah, I think so. I think they met. They met already. Like we have like also like churches here. We have like maybe just like not so many, but we have like we respect that other people should like practice their religions, and we are okay with that.
Jake, to pose the question to you then, Jake, how do you think that Christianity is going to change in the coming decades, whether as a mainstream religion or in personal practice? You can take it either way. How do you think the experience of Christianity is going to change in the coming decades?
The coming decades, I think, may be a period of painful growth for the Christian faith as a structured spirituality. Just because I see a lot of egotism in what is pushed out, and part of it is Christianity being paired with this like merchandising, marketing kind of mentality. Specifically when you look at places like Elevation Worship, right, or Hillsong, which has recently just had a big scandal where students were preyed upon by leadership, and you know they're really distorting this concept of redemption and you know second chances. Not that people don't deserve second chances, but perhaps you know you're not going to want to immediately give a sexual predator a second chance to prey upon somebody else, you know, and that is kind of where I see us having to work through some things. And in the United States specifically, I think it is going to be a growth toward a state of humility, because right now we've got this partisan pendulum that keeps swinging back and forth, and at one point someone's going to hit it too hard, and it's going to go one direction or another, and it's either going to be that the United States, in its kind of wallowing in extremism right now, this kind of right-wing extremism is going to bring itself past the point of no return and have to answer to the rest of the world for some atrocities, or it's going to be that the Christian faith in the United States gets diminished to kind of its rightful place as one of many religions. Because right now, one of the things that's so prominent in the evangelical church is that like right-wing mentality, that conservative kind of just extremism. And you hear a lot of people who are just spouting disinformation about all sorts of things, and it's too closely tied to politics. So I think first that in the next 50 years, the Christian church is probably going to lose its tax exempt status. And then secondly, I really just see that it's going to become more of a personal practice, that it's going to be something that individuals have to define for themselves again. And that doesn't mean that the Christian faith will go away, but that I think it'll become something closer to what it's supposed to be, which is not a political agenda. It's not, you know, anything like that. It's a spiritual practice. It is to draw you closer to the source of divine love, you know, and closer to each other, and not in a divisive way. So I'm hoping that it'll be a good thing. I'm hoping that humility will come about naturally, and that we just start, you know, kind of turning around with that. But one of the biggest issues that I'm seeing is that specifically in the United States with the evangelical churches, and this is not to say that all of them are doing this, right? I'm actually at a church that addressed this because he was talking about after 9/11, a lot of people like to say, oh, well, we were so unified. We were so, you know, everything. And he was like, no, I had to, because my pastor at my church is Middle Eastern descent. And he was like, no, I was asked if I wanted to change my name because of the rise in Islamophobia, and like how it's horrible. But this is something that is so pervasive here. And it's just ridiculous because they're just like, oh, well, like there's just like Islamic extremism. And I'm like, but we have Christian extremism. Christian extremism just tried to storm the Capitol,
Yep.
Like, I don't know how you can, have a problem with one and not the other. Also because we've had so few instances of actual Islamic, extremism or terrorism in the United States compared to the Christian identifying school shooters or, bombing abortion clinics or even just harassing people. And it's tragic, but that identity should never, in my opinion, be paired with a political agenda or even an attempt to exclude people. It's not an exclusivist practice. It should be inclusive. Christ was about bringing people together. He talks about the kingdom of God, and I believe that's something that we should all be, striving to firstly become a part of and bring people into. It's a community of love. And that professor that I talked about before, we talked about it at one point, and he wrote it down at one point. I'm not sure if this was his idea or somebody else's, but as the kingdom of God, K-I-N, as in like we're related already. We're part of the same family already. This is not a hierarchy. This is a kingdom. This is all of us together, and the sooner we realize that, I think the better off we're going to be. And I think that was like the whole point of, things that Christ was saying and Muhammad, and all it, I feel like that's the whole point. Anyway,
Jake, I love that. I love the point you brought up, because I was going to say it as a sub note, but you said it for me already. Religion and spirituality should be an individual journey. It shouldn't be something that's governed by titles and politics and these things. And again, it's why I keep bringing up different examples. I've mentioned cryptocurrency, Warren Buffett, and veganism today, because I see the same. For someone who's a very much looking for patterns, I do a lot of pattern recognition, I see the same kind of concepts happening in different fields. And so even like with the rise in Web 3.0, which is still a very early conversation to be having, that's really focused on individualism, because the way that Web 3.0 is structured is going to be a lot more individualistic. And so it goes hand in hand with, spirituality and religion the same way. Like you said, extremism is always an issue. So, there's, Sumaya said before, people who were part of ISIS, they were extremists. They weren't, normal, loving, understanding Muslims. They were extremists. Happens in America the same way. So, and again, like I mentioned, even my friend, like I did the recording with Farah, she even mentioned to me a situation where she met an extremist Buddhist who was talking about killing people, like who were not Buddhists. And I was like, what? And so they're out there, it's not about the religion, it's about the individual. We're the ones who have the problems. We're also the ones who can make the changes. And so you can never blame it on someone's religion or political identity. It's really about, this person's suffering because of something, and we have to help them figure it out, and that can come through big changes of like how we how we deliver these religions to people. It can also come through, content that we're putting on the internet, conversations we have on the street, and things of this nature. The final question I was going to pose to you guys was, what are some ways in which you're growing your own personal spiritual path right now? What are some things you guys have been going through or challenging yourselves on or really digging into, especially with COVID happening, the last few years, and we've had a lot of time to kind of be by ourselves and spend time alone. What are some ways that you guys are growing in your own spiritual journeys? Sumaya, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, I just as I told you, Ben, I challenge myself to be open and learn about other people, different beliefs, different lifestyles. I'm into meditation and even yoga. Recently I joined the yoga studio, and because my friend, she told me use yoga as medicine, not as exercise. So that's what I'm doing. I'm using it as a medicine because even being still is a challenge. And you feel connected, right? I think I was thinking about you actually when I said
of course.
Yeah, so it's a challenge, look at the candle and still and breathe and all of these things, and the chakras, and aromatherapy and all of these things. I'm really open to learn about different things. And I think like this is like part of being spiritual. And you like the funny part is like whenever I will dig into these things, go back to Islam, they are just like aligned. It's not different. It's the same. It's the same like path. But people are just like, no, but they even forgot about the values, you know, like I told you, they forgot about the value. Even it's written in the story of the prophet and how he was like, his own people fought him. His own people, you know, like he was in Mecca, his own people fought him for 13 years. His uncles, his relatives, you know, fought him. And they forgot about that. And then they just concentrate on hate and all of these things. And not looking at the core values of the religion. And I think these values actually in all religion, not only in Islam. I said the same core values that we are learning and we are forgetting, and then we are relearning again with a different religion, and then but the values are there. I think in all religions. No religion will teach you like to just like hate and kill, you know?
Right.
It's not, this is weird.
Yeah.
What kind of religion will teach you to like kill people?
Yeah. I love it, Sumaya. You gotta try it, see if it works, and not killing people. Try meditation and yoga and breathing. Be careful what I say. Yeah, try it and see if it works for you. Enjoy your time in jail. Yeah, obviously try different practices from different religions and see what's helping you, what's not helping you, and make a decision on keeping it part of you or letting it go. Jake, how about for yourself? What kind of spiritual growth are you experiencing in recent days, weeks, or months, whatever it may be?
Honestly, just kind of holding space has been a really big thing. And I know that's maybe not directly tied to religion, but it is a spiritual practice that I think is so necessary. And it's something that I've not always been great at, you know. I get distracted, I get jittery, I, you know, want to move around and fidget. But that's been one of the things, and really just, I guess, looking closer at myself than I do at other people, and not in like an egotistical way, like being like, oh yeah, Jake, you know, you're looking good. Like I'm talking about like introspectively, trying to sort out my own stuff before I go out and try and, you know, point fingers at people, especially because this last year has been so difficult. And I found myself last summer just freaking out about a lot of stuff because we had so many things going on in the United States, right? And so all of that has, I think, put me into a state of, you know, how you've got like the people generally reduce it to fight, flight, or freeze, right? It's a little bit more of a spectrum than that, but it is, that's, I guess, where I find myself sometimes. I'll just be sitting around and I just get salty about things for no reason, you know? And I just need to take a minute and just breathe and just recognize how blessed I am. You know, like that practice of gratitude and just recognizing what I have immediately around me and what I have within me, you know, which is the potential to change for the better. And that is in everyone else. That I think is what I have to look for most in myself, to see it in everyone else too, because there are so many things that are just scary, right? Especially when it comes to like, you know, you have family and your loved ones and all this, and some of the specific language about, well, I'll just touch on this briefly, but the previous administration had a lot of poisonous rhetoric towards Mexicans, right? And one of the things that was really scary was they ended up deporting, I think it was 3 US citizens, simply because they took them in, an ICE agent took them in. They weren't allowed to call anyone or do anything, but they could sign a voluntary deportation form to just get sent over the border. Once they were there, I read the story about this one kid. He called his mom to bring his passport and his birth certificate and stuff like that. So like I've still got my birth certificate in my car, you know, like just because in case. It's like, it's crazy, but like that is a real thing. And I was born here, you know, like, but that's one of those real fears, especially with like my family in Texas and all of this, because it was really bad there compared to here. And so all of that, like, is insane, and it's so much to hold on to and to freak out about. But like, I guess that's what I loved about, this one quote from the new Falcon and Winter Soldier TV show, right? Shameless plug, but it's so good. Where they hand off the mantle of Captain America, spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen it, to Sam Wilson, who's Falcon, and he's a black man. And they have this underlying dialogue, where they're like, hey, look, it's Falcon. They're like, no, man, that's Captain America. And he doesn't have powers. At one point, he has the option to take the super soldier serum. And he talks to this group of leadership at the end of the show. And he says, the only power that I have is that I can stand up here and believe that we can be better. And I think that is what I'm striving to do as well, is to hold on to that and to let that be my power. Let that be my position in life, that I look at everyone and see that potential. And I don't identify them with, this place that they're obviously not, but that we're moving into the future together. Because I feel like I tend to isolate a lot and just be like, well, I'm the only one working on this, and I'm like typing up paper and just rage putting in this paragraph and being mad about things. But I'm so blessed, you know what I mean? And there's still so many cool things about the world that outweigh all the bad ones, and I think focusing on those will help me have the outlook that will allow me to actually be a positive force for change. And that's not to be like, oh yeah, cool, I'll be Captain America. No, I'll be a tiny Captain America.
Yeah.
Just like each person that I encounter, you can be that little hopeful, whatever it is that they need. And that goes back to the listening as well, listening for what they need too. So, and that's a lot of things, but yeah, that's
Jake. I love what you said, Jake. There's a lot of cool elements there, but to touch on the last point, staying hopeful in the darkest situations is actually a superpower, because it's not what your instinct is. You don't want to stay hopeful. You don't see hope, so you don't feel hope. And so being the one that can stay hopeful, the one who can stay mindful and choose where your focus where your focus goes, your energy flows, it is a superpower, especially because we need lighthouses that are able to inspire other people and show them the direction and remind them that, these values are still alive, that this community is still alive, progress is still moving forward. Yes, there's a lot of fucking bullshit going on, but there's also, changes that are happening as well. And we're trying to focus more on the the positive side to fix the fucking bullshit, and it's not easy to stay hopeful and to stay proactive, especially whenever everything looks like it's going to shit. But it is a superpower, and I love that mission. Guys, I want to thank you both for making time to jump on today. This has been an incredible conversation. Was there anything that we didn't get to touch on you guys want to say in closing? Sumaya, anything you want to say in closing?
Actually, there's something that Jake said, about pointing fingers. Always,
which finger?
Point a finger, then 3 points back. Then
hi.
Behave.
Hi. Go ahead, Sumaya. If you point a finger, they point back at you.
When you point a finger, 3 point back at you.
3 point back at you. Yeah, that's true. I love that. Jake, was there anything you want to add in closing?
No, but just thank you, and thank you, Sumaya. This has been really fun. I am so grateful to get to have this discussion with you guys. This is really great, and I've got a lot to reflect on now. That's so cool. I'm so excited.
I'm honored to have this conversation. To everyone watching, thank you so much for being here. Please, I encourage you to check out Sumaya's content, her page, Jake's content, his page as well. Both phenomenal individuals with brilliant minds and living very, very impactful lives. So thank you again for watching. We'll see you on the next episode. Take care and have a great night. All right, guys, that's a wrap. How do you feel?
Bro, that was awesome. Thank you so much. This was so much fun.